Police officers who have arrested other police officers. What's the story? My dad was the arresting officer of an undercover narcotics detective for the murder of 2 fellow officers. From what I remember, the 2 officers and a technician caught him by surprise while he was stealing from an evidence room. He shot the 2 officers first and his firearm jammed, so the technician escaped. Detective got life in prison and died there. Like, what was his plan? Even if he killed the 3rd guy, they would still know who did it. It's not like he would have gotten away. Probationary officer goes on a blind double date with his roommate. Been at the racetrack drinking, so they take the train to downtown. Everyone is pretty drunk, him in particular. Maybe to entertain or show off for his date. He is acting goofy as everyone is getting off the train. He sees some guy bent over tying his shoes. Rocket scientist decides to leapfrog over the guy. Only neither of them have much balance. Probationary cop basically jumps over / on the guy and drives his face straight into the pavement because he is too drunk and the guy wasn't expecting it. Everyone jumps up and he starts trying to defuse the situation he just caused. Turns out the guy is a 17-year-old kid heading down to spend the weekend with his grandparents and has 2 broken teeth and a broken nose. The drunk cop starts saying stuff like, "It's okay. It will be fine. I'm a cop. It's all good." When he realizes the crowd isn't going to let him just walk away, he foot bails and tries to run off. A few guys chase him down and grab him. Cops get called and detain him. I was the on-call detective who was called out at 22:30 to handle the case. He refused to answer any questions and was booked in for felony battery based on the extent of injuries and age of victim. He never made it off probation and resigned. Edit. Since I saw this asked, I figured I would clarify. I wrote up and submitted the packet to the DA for prosecution. Nothing was swept under the rug. Trust me, a guy like this is not wanted on the police department. He was a probationary officer, so it would be easier to terminate him. The case was put through the system by the DA and he ultimately took a plea deal. A plea deal is very common across the entire spectrum of cases, whether it be a vandalism, theft of $1 billion, drug charges or murder. It is probably the most commonly used tool for adjudicating cases. So don't think a plea deal was arranged because he had been a cop. Remember, he was arrested and charged by the same department he was a probationary officer for. What a fucking idiot. Alcohol is a hell of a drug. Nearly all the stupid shit I have done has been under the influence. Not me, but my dad, who was a cop. He was still working as a full-time cop before switching full-time to firefighting and made a traffic stop around 11 at night back in the mid-80s. Nicer car, speeding well over the speed limit, so my dad initiates a stop. Before he is out of his cruiser, the driver has what looks like a badge hanging out of the window. My dad walks up, does the usual song and dance, and the driver said, "You obviously can't fucking see who I am." My dad says, "Yes, Lieutenant Colonel, I do, and right now I'm conducting a traffic stop." Turns out the driver was a lieutenant colonel in the Ohio State Highway Patrol, which is pretty high up in their rank structure. My dad again asks him for license and insurance, and the guy goes off, threatening to call Dick, as in Dick Sellers, who was governor at the time, and threatening his job, that he was just trying to get back to Columbus after an engagement and so on. Eventually he calls for backup and has another officer there to witness what was going on. Eventually my dad writes him a ticket, and while still screaming, "Mr. Pulling rank," drives away. The next shift my dad gets called in by his assistant chief and is asked about the stop, and apparently the colonel of OSHP was calling him about it. In the end they had to bring in the other officer to write a statement of what went on, and in the end nothing came of it, except the ticket wasn't contested and paid. More cops need to enforce speed limits on each other. It really pisses me off when I see cop cars speeding past me with no lights on when it's clear they aren't going on a call. They are just driving. It's much less common where I'm now, Washington, than it was in the South, where I'm from, when I got my motorcycle license. The Leo teaching the safety course repeatedly bragged about getting pulled over a few times per year doing over 100 miles per hour. Here in California that's a felony, an offense that can get your license revoked for 1 year, and simply flashing his badge and telling whoever made the stop to go deal with the real bad guys. It was a cringe-filled weekend to say the least. It also made me very wary of other motorcyclists. I'd been riding off-road all my life, but saw two classmates who had zero riding experience at the beginning of the weekend. One of which cried when we had to do the lock your brakes to perform a stop exercise and laid the bike down in the final test, something that was said to be an automatic fail. Pass the class meaning that they wouldn't have to take a physical test at the DMV when getting their licenses. It was a real shit show. Very wrong about 100 miles per hour plus being a felony. Cousin who was written up for 99 plus was told by citing officer that if he would written the actual speed then it would have been a felony that would caused him to lose his license for a minimum of a year. Whoops. Like, they actually make you lock up your brakes? Or are you just meaning this as an aggressive stop? Because that seems really stupid to make riders do. Locking up your brakes is basically guaranteeing, like half your riders, beginner riders at that, lay the bike down. Speaking as a motorcyclist here, it's going from like 15 miles per hour to full stop. Anyone should be capable of that if they want to ride a motorcycle. Former police officer and correctional officer here. I never actually arrested a fellow cop myself. However, my field training officer was arrested and fired from my former PD twice for drunk and disorderly. Before I worked there, he got his job back twice through union arbitration and, to his credit, gave up drinking. When I was working at the jail, we had a cop who was put into protective custody / suicide watch after being arrested for stalking a woman he met on a call. He got obsessed with her and kept bothering her after the fact and after she reported him, he made threats against her. A fellow co at my jail was arrested for producing and distributing child pornography. He got girls as young as 9 to send him nude photos, which he distributed on the dark web. He's doing 25 years in prison minimum. He won't be eligible for parole for another 15 years or so. We had 7 officers at the jail beat a disabled inmate and then lie about it on their reports. The shift commander then tried to erase the video. All were fired and arrested, but were later acquitted of all charges. Sad thing was, they were all guilty as hell. My business got robbed by 3 teenagers once. They just stole something expensive off the wall and ran out. Anyway, I called the cops and they stayed a long time flirting with my 17-year-old employee. I had to ask them to leave, which was really weird. You know you are getting old when suddenly you are older than most the police you deal with. Anyway, one of the cops starts calling my employee at work under the guise of following up on the crime. Give me a break. I had to email him personally and tell him to never contact my 17-year-old employee again and to only come to me from now on. Was a little scary cause I never had to stand up to a crooked cop before. Anything ever come of it? No. After the email we never heard from him again. Thank you for standing up for her. Too many times there is nobody that has our backs. Not a police officer, but I worked as a contractor for a law enforcement digital evidence lab. There was a new guy who had just retired as a cop, but came on because he wanted to do computer forensics and supposedly had some background in it. We were in training together learning about cell phone forensics when he missed a day of training. That night he was on the news because he had been arrested after cops closed in on him for soliciting texts or pictures from underage girls. We weren't part of the investigation, but did send his work computer over to the lab that was working on it, and he had porn on it. Overall we were all shocked, but also couldn't not chuckle at the irony that he was a Compat 6 forensics analyst who didn't know how to hide evidence on a computer. Some people are thinking, oh, and how should evidence be hidden on a computer? Real answer is don't. You won't be good enough. There is a tool for catching or uncovering whatever you're thinking of doing. And if it doesn't exist now, they can hold your shit as evidence in an ongoing investigation until a tool can be devised. Best practices to not commit any crimes. But if you must commit a crime, no computer is in any way your friend. Best chance would be to commit your crime alone, in remote wilderness, at night, deep in a cave, under a blanket of leaves, with no possessions of any kind, including the possessions of others, within a 10-mile radius of you. The single week I had going over computer and network security, I learned that there is absolutely no way to hide anything anywhere unless you have physical access to all systems and servers involved, are a professional gets paid to do this hacker/it engineer, and capable of destroying all physical storage mediums beyond the point of turning them to ash. And yes, I mean physical access to all systems, including whatever server/cloud-based computer you needed to access in the first place. I actually have had to arrest 3 separate members of the justice system this year. First, a practicing lawyer and former judge who had been utilizing his position to coerce sex from defendants. He utilized this leverage even after he was not a judge anymore. Investigation by 601 revealed he had about a dozen victims. So a warrant for his arrest was made, which I executed. Arresting a guy you used to put defendants in front of is a very odd feeling. He weaseled out of prison time and got it all suspended and put on a direct supervision probation program. Absolute horseshit. I've seen guys do way less get way more time. But it's not really a secret that money has a habit of tipping the scales of justice. Next was a prison guard whom strangled his girlfriend, then stalked her relentlessly. I actually arrested him twice because after he posted bail on the first one he was spotted lurking outside her home only 45 minutes after being released. He's currently in on felony assault, strangulation of a household member, and felony violation of a protection order. He's still in my jail awaiting trial with a bail that has been substantially increased. I'm anticipating prison time for him, but only time will tell. Third was a city police officer. I'm a county deputy sheriff because we received a call from a 6-year-old that his dad was in the garage doing drugs and wouldn't come out. Showed up to find 4 very young kids running around unsupervised. It was a city police officer smoking meth that he had confiscated during a traffic stop and not reported or turned into evidence. 601 took the case from us due to potential conflict of interest and have placed him in another county's jail, and I haven't heard any more about it. Hope he does time too. What kinda asshole leaves his little kids totally alone and unsupervised while they smoke meth? Especially when said person is a fucking cop. Unforgivable in my opinion. But yeah. 2020 has been a very strange year for me. Wow, very similar thing happened to a judge in Nashville too. He even went so far as to make a call to let a personal acquaintance out of holding, who then went back to the wife who reported him and almost beat her to death. Wow. I'm from Nashville. I never heard of this. Happened about 4-5 years ago. Look up Cassie Morland. Wow. Between that, the officer who was fired for being sexually assaulted by another officer, the report on sexual assaults in the department, and my friend who just got reinstated as sergeant after they accused her of breaking the blue wall of silence. Nashville's law enforcement is really fucked up. So glad I ended up not working there. Locked up one for a DUI. Dude was passed out in his car at a red light. He worked for my department. I knew him, but not too well. Came up to me and apologized a few months later, which I didn't expect. Nice enough fella. Good ending. Get a call one night about a domestic. Upon arrival, this woman was bleeding heavily from her face. Said her boyfriend was a cop and he was in the next room. We talked to him and he tells us to how she deserved it. Had to use force on him and get him in custody. Guy had close to 8 years on. Fired on the spot by IAD when they arrived. Fuck him. I have no sympathy for women beaters. This is so common here in Brazil. It's so sad. The military police ignores whatever crimes their policemen commit, and the story only ends when the abused woman ends up dead. Oh, not only in Brazil. True. I live in rural Missouri, USA. My best childhood friend, an officer, was shot and killed by her boyfriend, also an officer, about 14 years ago. We only later learned how controlling and how extensive his abuse was. In Street Louis last year, an officer died by playing Russian roulette with her officer boyfriend. I'm fairly certain the guy shot her, and RR was the excuse he came up with. This was during my time as a United States Marine Corps MP. Never arrested another police officer during my other gigs. Got a phone call from the guy's wife saying he was drunk and refusing to leave the house. Knocked on the front door, but found him crying on the porch about his wife leaving him because she wasn't happy anymore. She walked by the porch and motioned for me to come inside through the glass door. She proceeded to show me the red marks on her throat, the hole in the door that he punched through beside her head, and some other evidence that doesn't need to be disclosed. After asking him to come inside and get dressed, he refused to leave with me. I wasn't going to handcuff him in front of his kid, but he decided to take that moment to run from me. He was faster and got away for about 5 minutes before I found him walking through a playground a couple building over. Caught up to him. He punched me, but was taken into custody after a slight use of force. On the way to the station he tried to kick out a window in my cruiser and told me I was ruining his life. He ended up getting charged with about 7 different charges and was kicked out of the Marines. On his way out he lied to NSYS and got an investigation opened on me for rape. Investigation was completed thoroughly and all charges against me were marked as unsubstantiated, but the charges still showed up after I got out and went through a background check for my security clearance. Semicolon 10/10. Would do again. My slight inconvenience was totally worth it for him to go down for domestic assault charges. Edit for clarification, the rape charges that he falsified were by him stating that he, quote unquote, had Greg Stang raped a girl at the Marine Corps ball due to a law passed in Ike 2013. All military sexual assault allegations have to be investigated by a Title 18 law enforcement agency outside federal agency. NSYS was the one that took my case and subsequently cleared me. Charges are still found on a background check, even though I was cleared 100%. Do the cleared charges affect you in any ways nowadays? When I did a background check for my current agency, it caused them to do a double take come talk to me again. I disclosed it the first time we spoke, but I don't think they saw it until they dug into it more. Still got the security clearance. Still have the job. So hopefully they don't think about it. Edit. Also, as my deputy provost marshal said to me at the time, it's a bad look. But once I was cleared there was no way anyone could doubt that the charges were bullshit. They were fully investigated. Over 119 days. And not a shred of evidence was found. I knew it was bullshit. My friends knew it was bullshit. And my leadership at my base knew the charges were bullshit. I just wish they could be completely removed so I don't have to explain it all. Though, I don't mind explaining it, because it shows I have the courage and willpower to do what is right no matter who the client/suspect is. I think I've used it as a great talking point when asked about it. That seems weird that the charges are still show up on your background check. Feel like people have actual guilty verdicts wiped out for other things. Glad it's apparently not that big of a deal though. I didn't think they would after I was cleared, but I saw them with my own eyes when the investigator showed them to me. Right below the charges it says unsubstantiated in all caps, but that doesn't change the fact that they're there. If you are new to TattleTale TV, please subscribe. We have new videos every day. Stay tuned for more coming up next.